And I always encourage my clients, just keep asking questions at the risk of being obnoxious, because you want to walk away from that experience understanding why something was necessary. If you don't understand that, it's going to linger with you.
Diane is an experienced psychotherapist who has specialized a majority of her career in the postpartum period. She's written a book called Life After Birth, Thriving in the Postpartum Period, has developed an app called Digital Doula 2.0, and has just launched a course called 8 Keys for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester. In this conversation, together, Diane and Augustine talk about health and relationships postpartum, physical and mental health, trauma after birth, how birth prep has and has not changed over the years, how to empower yourself to be in charge of your birth, and a lot about the medical industrial complex. Let's dive into this exciting conversation.
Well, welcome back to the Midwifery Wisdom Podcast. I'm very excited to be joined by Diane Speier. Hi, Diane.
Hi, it's good to be here.
And we are spread across the world, broadcasting in the U.S., and I'm in India, and you're in England, and here we are with this global reality.
It's wonderful to actually be able to share knowledge and wisdom across the continents.
Isn't it amazing? Well, why don't we start by you telling us all about who you are, what you do, and what you're about?
Well, I've been a birth professional for 45 years, and I started out as a birth educator, and very early, before we even had a concept about what doulas are, I became a doula in 1978, and mainly to the people who were my clients. But after that, I kind of grew into I've always been focused on what happens after the baby's born. So I had a postpartum support group, and that group sort of morphed into this, a mother and baby exercise class. And I did that for 20 years. I taught birth for 20 years. And then I came to the UK. And what I found was, I didn't grow out of it. I got to be an old person, and I was still feeling very passionate about making that transition to parenthood as smooth as possible for parents, really. And I think that there is a dearth of information about what happens after the baby is born. We don't really have a lot of sort of postpartum support. We don't have a lot of postpartum care. And as a result, I wrote a book, and it was initially the source of the inspiration for the book was my daughter when she gave birth to her first child. And she grew up with me working with mothers and babies all the time. And so she said to me, well, where are all the books on the postpartum period? And I said, well, there haven't been many that are written. And she said, well, it's time for you to write that book. So and that's my book over there. It's called Life After Birth, A Parent's Holistic Guide for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester. And then before I actually published the book, we created an app called Digital Doula. And essentially it was like the first draft of the book. And then when the book was released, we completely upgraded it to Digital Doula 2.0. And the contents of the app correspond to the sections of the book. And it was an opportunity to add even more information there. And it's unlike a book, you can continue to add and edit as you go along. And that was released just at the beginning of COVID. And
it's amazing.
Although the first one was just an iOS or Apple version, the second one was also an Android version. And I just feel very dedicated to the fact that we need to get the message out to people that there are things that they can do, simple things that they can do to feel stronger and more confident and the normal challenges that happen to people after they bring home the baby, or even if they have the baby at home, whatever. It's like, no one said anything. Why didn't anybody tell me about this? So a couple of years ago, I came up with the idea that maybe it's time to put this as an online course. And I took a paradigm that had 8 modules to it. And I've created this course. And we're launching this tomorrow on June 6th. The first module is here. And we're doing it as a beta test so that people who come into it can provide feedback and they can get it an incredibly discounted rate to participate. But they will get incredible level of information about each of the 8 modules focuses on a different aspect of what happens. So the first module is called How to Baby-Proof Your Relationship. And it focuses on the fact that most people don't know that their relationship is going to go through a real change after the baby arrives.
Boy, is it. In fact, I think there's this great meme on TikTok saying how would you feel if your partner decided to date other people and then move them into the house and told you to just deal with it, right? And that's the level of commitment that has happened with the new baby.
That's right. Well, yeah.
Not everyone's ready to be polyamorous,
Yeah. I found that giving the kind of information that people need about the relationship changes it really helps them to become a team rather than taking the stress of the newborn period out on each other. And so we provide, resources and bonuses that, address some of the challenges that are going to come up within the relationship. The second module is about energy medicine. I'm introducing the magic of energy medicine because there are certain protocols and techniques that anybody can do, even a child, that can make the difference between, in terms of feeling them able to take care of themselves. And I did a training, and I'm about to go through the certification process in Eden Energy Medicine, and I've applied that to the postpartum period, and I applied it in the book and in the app, and now there's a whole module on it so that people understand how it works. And so using something that we call the daily energy routine can lift their energy levels during that time when sleep deprivation makes them feel drowsy and fatigued all the time. There are things they can do to increase their milk supply. There are things that they can do to manage their stress levels. There are things that they can do to enhance the bonding that's going on between them. So each of those energy medicine techniques, actually we pulled them all together and created a 60-page download where it's all in one place. In the book, it's all, each section has an energy medicine piece. The third section is module is called loving kindness, because all too often what happens and it incorporates mindfulness is that women become very self-critical after they have a baby. And either I'm doing it wrong, there's something wrong with me, or something along those lines, where I really want them to understand that as you are learning to love this new baby, and as you're protecting your relationship, you need to also provide some self-love to yourself. And one of the things that I learned while I was researching that was that loving kindness research indicates that what it does is it increases personal resources, and it also increases positive perceptions. And so that's something that we all need when when we're just had a baby, is input and strategies that help us to feel positive and to create those kind of personal resources that gets us through that. The fourth one is called Less is More, and that helps people focus in on what really matters, and less people, less visitors, less stuff that they have to deal with, less social media. And then they can get to learn about their babies and about their relationship and the dynamics between them and each other and their baby. And if you can focus on that, that's going to really make a big difference in terms of being distracted by other people and other things and other stuff. So that's less is more. And then the next one is the new normal, because a lot of the times women want to get back to normal, but normal changed. And it's a completely different kind of experience being a parent, and, especially on the first one. So it's about embracing that. It's about looking forward rather than looking backwards at what was or what you're now missing. So how do we get to do that new normal? How do we encourage breastfeeding? How do we make that a really positive experience of moving forward with a baby? And then the next one is called expectations. And the expectations are something that a lot of people get stuck on. They have unrealistic expectations. And then when they don't work out the way they wanted or expected them to, then they feel let down. They feel disappointed. That can be the beginning of the spiral down into depression, because the disappointment becomes the trigger for that. And what else? Then there are two. The last two are self-care, and the last one is support. So the whole paradigm actually becomes an acronym for wellness. The W stands for we, energy medicine, loving kindness, less is more, new normal, expectations, self-care, and support. And if you've done that, if you've got that, if you understand that, and we fill in the gap of information about life after birth, I think that really makes the transition a smoother, more positive, more confident, all of that kind of experience for people. So that's my mission.
That's awesome.
Just to get the message out there to people that you can get information about life after birth and feel a lot more confident about what you're up to.
Well, this sounds like a really ideal book and course for midwives to recommend to their clients.
Yeah, it would be. It would be great.
Midwifery care, it ends. We're there for the early postpartum, but then eventually they graduate out of our care, and yet they're still postpartum without so much resources. So I love this recommendation. How do people find out?
Oh, by the way, the name of the course, yeah. Okay, so the name of the course is called 8 Keys for Thriving in the Fourth Trimester, subtitle, Unlocking the Potential of the Postpartum Period. So people can find that if they go to the website, thrivinginthefourthtrimester.com/course. Okay, and the fourth is a 4th rather than spelled out. So thrivinginthefourthtrimester.com/course. Then they can really get themselves, engaged with this. And it's really good. I mean, it's best if somebody's pregnant and doing it, because they can really feel prepared for what's to come. But the beauty of this is that people can already have had their baby, and they can sort of dip into it, in and out of it. Each lesson may, depending on which lesson it is, but the average is about 5 minutes. So people can say, okay, I'm going to go into lesson 3 of module 1 and see what that has to say. And it's, it's available any time of day and night. So I really hope that we can provide the kind of information that's been missing. I can't tell you how many people have said to me over the years, since the publication of the book, I wish I would have had this book when I was having my babies. And it really does focus on, a lot of books are written about what can go wrong. So there can be a focus on postpartum depression or anxiety or any of these perinatal mood and anxiety disorders. And by the way, I should have also said at the beginning, is that I'm a perinatal psychotherapist and a psychologist too. So this was the reason why I was always fascinated by what happens to a person psychologically after they've had a baby. And one thing led to another. So where they come together, my psychological background and my birth professional background coalesce as a perinatal psychotherapist. But I really feel like if we can get the information out there, then the incidence of these kinds of perinatal mood and anxiety disorders can go down, because a lot of the time they just didn't have the information they needed. And if you have that information, then you can kind of guess, okay, this is probably normal because, it was also brought up, whereas a lot of times women feel if their experience doesn't match what's going on around them, whether that's in social media or in their mother's group, that they feel like doing something wrong, or as I said, before, they feel like there's something wrong with them.
Yeah, that's a devastating way to parent. Feeling like you're
It
doing it
is.
wrong. Yeah.
And it's, because particularly on I've been doing this for so long, and for so many years, social media was not a facet of new parenthood, but it is now.
Right.
And too often, women will be comparing themselves to what somebody's ideal post on Instagram and think, my life's not like that. Something's wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, when going through this, writing the book, obviously all your years of work and now the course, what's most surprising to you?
I think when I became a certified becoming a facilitator years ago, which focused on the relationship aspects of that perinatal period. And I found that some of the statistics were very striking to me. And I wrote an article in the Journal of Health Visiting in the UK here on fostering the connection, because 92% of couples will experience increased conflict in the first year after baby's born. That's like everybody.
Yeah.
And then I also learned that 67% of couples will say that their satisfaction with their relationship is declined over the first 3 years. Now that's 2/3. So I felt it was really, that's why we became the very first module, because I felt, let's start here. Let's make you a team so it can work as like a duet, rather than battling up against each other, because each of you is going through this transition at different times. So that's probably the most surprising aspect of the work that I've done. But over the years, I've really found that because of the classes that I've done, I would work with mothers and babies, and I would just watch them grow as people, as parents. And, so many people years later would come up to me and say, I'm still friends with the people that I met in your exercise class, and even when my youngest was in elementary school, at one of the kind of PTA gatherings, one of them came up to me 10 years later, and she said, we're still friends, and our kids are friends.
I had this experience recently. It was really amazing. I got photos from a mom baby group that I led in New Jersey in I don't even know, must have been 2000. They had just all gone to college, and they had a group photo with them all. Can you imagine?
Yeah, that is so, I can't imagine because of the fact that, I've had a similar kind of experience. And so that's, the support aspect, the module on support is really about creating a sense of community. Because, and it, in the app, there's a whole additional section. It's not part of the book, called It Takes a Village, because it really does take various people to help us raise our children to adulthood. And it's sort of the change in the 20th century down to the sort of nuclear family. And the nuclear family is no longer the norm in terms of different shapes and sizes of families. But it is, it is so important to feel supported by other people. One of the things that we're doing as part of this online course is we created a Facebook group that people can come to. People can get feedback, they can share, they can learn, as part of that Facebook group that I'll be monitoring. So if they have any questions, we can talk about that. And so I really feel that a sense of community is important. And I think that what I was doing for those 20 years with mothers and babies was creating that sense of community. I think it was about 2 or 3 years ago, somebody reached out to me that had been in my classes in 1986 and found me and said, I just wanted to say that, you gave me words of wisdom that have stayed with me for my entire, parenting experience. So, and I just really feel it's important. Now I have 4 children, which I think is an occupational hazard. And then I have I have 3 grandchildren and a 4th one due in 2 weeks. So I'll be going back to New York to visit with them and see, and meet my new grandchild and help out if I can, if they'll let me.
Amazing.
So yeah, I never get tired. I still feel very passionate about it. I still want people to have a positive experience after they've had a baby. And also, there's the issue, sometimes trauma is an outcome of the birth experience. And as a perinatal psychologist, I'm familiar and I have had clients that I've helped through the trauma so that they can get on, because that's another, you mentioned, if people just feel that they're wrong, that's not a good way to be parenting. But if you've been traumatized by a birth experience, that's also a hard way to start, because it interferes with your behaviors, with your consciousness, with your ability to parent. And that's a really unfortunate start to it. So I'm hoping, I can't do anything about necessarily someone's trauma, but there will be content in there to address them and to make suggestions and encourage people to get the kind of professional support that's going to make a difference. And I wrote a chapter in a anthology on the first sort of 1,001 days from conception to age 2. On my chapter was on birth trauma, and it's about the data coming. There was a whole group of articles that came in 2015, and I guess it's sort of getting close to 10 years old. So maybe it's time to see what else. But at that point, one research project just discovered that anywhere from 33 to 45% of women felt traumatized by their birth experience. It's a huge number.
Yeah, there's no numbers that look really similar in Australia that have just come out around birth trauma. It's really devastating.
It may not meet the threshold of PTSD, but right. It does. It's the perception that matters. If the woman feels traumatized by her experience, that's going to impact her nervous system. It's going to impact her vigilance, her hypervigilance, her ability to tolerate, everything.
Yeah.
So, that's important to know. And again, from the beginning of when I was first being a birth educator, we were fighting for the rights of husbands and partners to be in the delivery room, and we were fighting for the rights of them to be during the cesarean section, and we were fighting for all these things. It was really progressing in a very positive, kind of more natural way. But then it's almost like, and seems to be right after I moved to the UK in 1998. Then this sort of the whole medicalization of obstetrics became so risk averse that they started doing and creating policies around whether someone could have a VBAC or a vaginal birth after cesarean, and restrictions about what you could do about that. And then it seems that things were going in the opposite direction, because for a long time while I was here, after I got my PhD, using, by the way, the accounts of people's birth stories, I found that, I was an academic health researcher for about 12 years. And when I came back to birth, I found that things had sort of diverged in one direction, and it was a smaller contingent, was the sort of orgasmic birth, ecstatic birth, all natural birth. And the other way was hyper-medicalized birth, hyper-restrictive, increases in inductions, increases in cesarean sections, all of that. And it was like 2 different worlds, really.
And it still is. Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah. And that hadn't quite been the case when I started working on my PhD after getting here. So it was, for me, it was an awakening to come back to see the differences and more aligned with the sort of natural birth.
This episode is brought to you by Lawnmower Bookkeeping, a virtual bookkeeping firm supporting midwives and doulas. We understand that what you love to do is serve mamas, but sometimes nothing takes you out of your zone of genius like thinking about the money. So while we focus on managing your books, you can focus on client care. By keeping your books clean and tidy,
we can help you make confident money moves, pay yourself a consistent salary, proactively save for taxes, and plan for growth. Learn more about working with us by clicking the link in the show notes.
But even the natural birth world has gone to an extreme too, it feels like, in a lot of ways. With natural birth being more important than the perception of safety, or natural birth being the whole goal, even if the baby dies, like this whole extreme movement towards avoiding intervention is really extreme now.
Mm-hmm. Well,
do you see it in England as much as we see it here in the US?
Less so, because midwifery is, the midwife is the first point of contact in the UK.
Yeah.
It's very different than an obstetric model in the United States.
Yeah.
So you're less like, but it was still, because I'm part of a midwifery research sort of listserv, so I'm aware of what goes on both in the research side of things and the practice side of things, and see that there is some concern, and I think it had to do with the phraseology around normal birth and normal birth at all costs. And there's some, but I don't know how extreme it can get. But then there are also people that were into lotus birth, and there are various kinds of doing it on their own, and free birth. With the terminology, I don't know if I have it all up to date these days, but But I think the important thing is to have a positive experience if you can. And although I'm not working now as a doula and in terms of birth work, it is that would be one of my purposes is working as a birth doula, was to help make that a positive experience for people, and to work within, most time, if it was in a hospital, working within in the structure, but getting what they need for their comfort, for their confidence, for their ability to sort of work with their bodies. All of that. And I think that's one of the important things about doula care. I don't know if we have an updated version, but I'm going to say that 15 years ago, there were studies that were part of the Cochrane that indicated that people that had doulas with them had a reduced incidence of interventions. They had a reduced cesarean sections, the benefits of that. And probably there needs to be an update on that.
I agree. That famous Marshall Krauss quote, if the doula were a drug, it would be unethical not to use it, right?
Actually, I think that's John Kennel's.
Oh, you're right. It's John Kennel.
Yeah. And also, Phyllis Klaus wrote the foreword on my book, and she continues to be a friend of mine, even after Marshall's death and Kennel's death. But it's true, and more it seems to have been incorporated into an obstetric model. But there's still not a lot known about it. And I know that my daughter-in-law is planning on having a doula, and she's wanting to have a home birth, and she'll have a midwife and a doula, and I think her mother will be there as well, and my son. And I hope it all goes according to plan. But I find when I asked her questions, I learned that there is the same approach to birth, and certainly not to afterwards, as there was when I was teaching classes on a regular basis. So childbirth education, I wonder, are people really doing that, or are they just getting the information online? And
they say that only about 30% of pregnant people take childbirth class, and many of those are the hospital how to be a good patient classes.
Right. And so I think that sort of disappeared out of the landscape, and I think it's unfortunate because there are things that there's some gaps in information and knowledge that could really make a difference. I think hypnobirthing has become more popular, whether that's within that 30% or not. For me, because I'm a hypnotherapist, when I came back into the birth world, I sort of did the training because it synthesized hypnotherapy with birth work. And, people will do that. But I fear that the understanding about what happens during birth isn't there. And I think it may be contributing to some of the statistics about the level of intervention and the level of cesarean section. I mean, I just said something, as simply as, how will you know? I mean, like when I was teaching, I would teach a whole class just on labor, and then a second class on delivery, sort of like the next class was that. And so how will you know that you're in labor? And she couldn't answer the question. And, so we'll have contraction, or maybe about water. It's like, what are all of the different parts of that activate labor? And so that concerns me, because we need to unlearn a lot of the things that women get about information about their bodies and how their bodies work. And, when I was teaching, after I was a Bradley teacher, I created my own methodology called birth empowerment, because I think that birth, when it's done well, is a very empowering experience. And I can give you 2 examples. I mean, after I left here, the very last person that I taught, I did not speak to her about, her birth until months later when I was visiting New York. And I spoke to her, and she said, I know why you call it birth empowerment, because she felt that very strongly. Another client that I had, who I was doing a lot of counseling with as well as preparing, she'd had a traumatic first birth experience down in Florida. She moved up to New York. Her midwife said, you should, reach out to Diane, because she can help you to transcend that experience and prepare you for the next birth. And I did. And she did sessions together, but she also did my birth education classes. And in the end, she did have a second cesarean. But all along the way, she was part of the decision-making process. And she was experiencing that sort of knowing that, okay, I'm getting the answers that I need. I don't like this. I'd rather have a vaginal birth. But she came back to me and said it was still such an empowering experience to be able to work and collaborate with her practitioners and feel like she was still in charge of the situation. So you can have but you can have both experiences and still feel it's very empowering. So I guess I still have the energy around helping women feel empowered about having a baby and becoming parents. I don't think it'll ever go wrong.
I agree. And there's also there's this sub-belief, this layer below what you're saying that I want to try to verbalize, because I think this will be really apropos our audience. And I share this belief you have as well. And it's this idea that actually the outcome is less important than the process. How you end up actually delivering your baby is sort of secondary to the process of being at the center of the decision making, being respected, having dignity, and being honored. Like that is more important than actually the birth. And I think what has happened with this very extremist free birthing movement is this idea that the only way to get that kind of freedom, the only way to get that kind of respect is to opt out of care providers entirely. And what I love that you're reminding us about is actually it can happen where you get to be the center of the story, even when you invite others into it. And of course, that's a hallmark of midwifery. But there are more and more physicians who understand that they're not actually in charge of someone else's body. They're just an advisor, right? So that could start at childbirth education. That could start with doulas, is helping them not avoid intervention at all costs, but ask the questions that allow them to know whether or not they're getting what they need in that environment, in that moment. Because we don't want to have
And you know what?
Yeah, go ahead.
And I've written a blog about this, and and I've written one more recently about medical consumerism. And but there are 4 questions. So I was asking the question. The first question is why. Tell me why you want to do this. Okay. The second question is, what are the alternatives? There's always more than one alternative. Okay. The third question is, what are the benefits and the risks versus, in terms of making that decision? And then the fourth question is, what are the side effects? Maybe it's medication that you're taking, or maybe there are side effects of even having some kind of surgical intervention. But it's like knowing what they are. Sometimes there are long-term outcomes related to the kind of medication that was used during labor, in terms of the breastfeeding experience of the mothers and other hand. But they don't get that information when they're making that decision. So they really need, and I always encourage my clients, just keep asking questions at the risk of being obnoxious, because you want to walk away from that experience understanding why something was necessary. If you don't understand that, it's going to linger with you. Years ago in New York, I used to get phone calls from people I didn't even know, calling me 6 months later and saying, I had to have a cesarean, but I really don't understand why I had to have the cesarean, and it's really plaguing me. And then that becomes the undercurrent of their experience of parenting. Not good, in my book. So, I mean, it wasn't even my client, but I was happy to help them to sort of make sense of the experience that they had. But if you ask those questions, then you understand. Just like this woman who told me, she felt empowered even though she had a cesarean section, because she did ask those questions, because she was collaborating, because she was still in charge, even though someone was going to surgically deliver her baby. And so I really do feel strongly that we need this sort of, the idea of medical consumerism is not something that's very well known. It's particularly not so in the UK, where a national health service, people don't feel like they can challenge things.
Right.
But, like some people go to the hospital, this, and they want to do something, and then somebody says to them, oh, no, you can't do that. And they say, why not? It's a hospital policy. I tell people, ask them where it's written. Please show me where this hospital policy is written, because most of the time there won't be such a thing. And it's just their maneuver to get compliance out of the people who are patients there. So I had an example of myself. I had to have a nuclear scan done, and it comes in different parts of it. And I went in there, and this is a hospital here in the UK. And I went in, and so I did the first part, and at the end of that, I said, I'd like to see the scans when it's done. Oh, I don't know about that. I said, why not? And they said, well, it's a hospital policy. I said, can you please show me where that's written? And he was, no. So when I came back for the second part of that, it had been discussed, and I was given permission to go into that little cubicle and have a look at the scans on screen. And so it's something as simple as that. If somebody is trying to manipulate you by using the hospital policy card, challenge it.
Yeah. A particularly challenging card that the hospital system uses a lot is what we call the dead baby card.
Yeah.
If you don't do this, your baby will die. How do you coach families to get through that scenario?
Well, it's like I used to say there were 7 words. I'm a little concerned about the baby. That was the expression that I used. It's not the actual death specifically spoken, but I'm a little concerned about the baby, and people back off. Oh, well, in that case, then do whatever you want. They need to be able to say, what again, the alternatives. Either I do this or the baby dies. Are you telling me there's no third option? And I tell them to understand that this may or may not be true, but it is a way to get your compliance. So challenge it. I do think we had to sort of push back against somebody saying, oh, if you don't do this, the baby could die. How will my baby die? What will cause it to, it's like really saying, don't listen to that.
Yeah.
Go with
That's
your
hard to do.
instincts.
That's hard to do.
Yeah.
All the more
definitely
reason
is.
for perinatal education and
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. I remember one time when I was teaching classes, and there was a practice locally to where I was, and I got clients from them, and they were obstetricians that worked together with midwives. And I would tell them that, oh, well, and each doctor had their own kind of issue. And so one doctor did not let people have ruptured membranes for very long. They'd have to go into the hospital. And, and I'd say, bear in mind that the clock starts when your water ruptures, And, as a result of that conversation, one of my clients decided she wanted to go to the midwives instead of the doctor because she didn't like that sort of one size fits all because of his, lasting experience. So I would teach my clients how to be consumers of medicine and healthcare and feel strong about it. And also, as a doula, I would find sometimes there were things that I would observe that I, really felt strongly about. And I had one woman who was an elderly primipara, really, and having her first baby. I think she was 5, and they were so engaged with the monitoring and the equipment that I just said, let's focus on the mother here. Well, she's having a baby. And I made a comment out loud. There was no one in the room at the time, but as I was saying this, one of the obstetricians came in and I said, anytime the professionals are more concerned about the equipment than the mother in labor, that's a problem. And she did not like that. But it was true. And because I had a collegial relationship with the person who was the head of that group, which was a hospital-based group in New York, I mentioned it to her and I said, that's just not the way to practice obstetrics in the hospital.
Yeah. But that's part of the symptom of obstetrics is it gets so lost in the minutia of the measuring, the weighing and the charting and the graphing that they're missing like the human experience in a lot of processes.
You must be familiar with Michel Odon, yeah? And he liked, way back, we've been friends now since 1985, he would draw attention to the fact that the word obstetric has the same root as obstruct. And it is an obstructive approach to childbirth. And I think that's true. But it's almost like if you're well educated, and for me, education was not enough. It was the practical application of what I was teaching. Then you have more fortification to challenge things that may not be right, or to, stand up for yourself in the situation where, I don't want to do this. I would prefer to do that. And work with the system. Find the workarounds so that you can get what you need, even though the hospital may be a little bit constraining in terms of what they consider to be maternity behavior.
Yeah. Or opt out of the system entirely and choose midwifery, right?
Yeah. I mean, I had my second child in the Childbearing Center, the Maternity Center Association, which was the first birth center to open in the United States. And the whole time, people kept saying to me, but what if? This is 1976. And it was like, I'm not concerned. I feel confident about using the midwives. I can confident about this place of birth. So I was confident. And after that, I used midwives. I never went back to an obstetrician. And it's just not aligned with my views about how the body can powerfully give birth. And but you do, and I think it's probably still true these days. I bet my daughter-in-law is getting those questions still, almost 50 years later. My oldest is going to be 50 in September. So that's amazing. And
wow.
So yeah, I do feel like we need to not only help people feel empowered to give birth powerfully, but also to have that transition. What happens after the birth? Because a lot of people experience baby shock. Yeah, nobody told me it would be like this. How come nobody told me it would be like this? And so what do you do with that? And how do you make the most of it? And how do you feel strong and confident about that? Because that's, again, it's my mission to facilitate that experience for people.
It's beautiful. What an amazing career you've had with so many interesting pathways.
Yeah, it really has been. And I feel blessed in that way, that I have the long experience of watching trends in birth kind of up and down, and attitudes about what's good and what's not good, and the evolution of things like free birth, even though, wouldn't be my choice, but allowance for people to make that choice if it's right for them. But also, I've never been an extremist, so, I feel very strongly that it's informed choice. The International Childbirth Education Association, which is like the first organization, I guess, that I was part of, really focused on informed choice or informed consent. And from there on, I just remember going back, this is like memory lane for me, but I worked the same group that I mentioned before. I remember when birth planning became a thing. And I met with him, and he said, I don't like birth planning. And I was saying, but let me explain to you why it's useful. You get to see what somebody wants. It's there in black and white. You don't have to guess. And you have a pretty good idea of what kinds of things might be, accepted or not accepted in that. But I think what he explained to me was that the way that people would come in is they would say, I refuse to do this. I won't do that. I don't want this. And it was all negative. So I would tell my clients, I'd say, go in there and say it in a positive way, make your statements in a positive way. So I feel strongly about it's really important to me that, and then all of a sudden, it's just you're expressing your preferences. You're not making demands, because the demand and the negative aspect or the bias, the negativity bias in that made doctors feel that you were challenging their authority. But if you go in and you say, it's really
there's a whole symptom of the patriarchy. But
that's
I get what you're saying.
Intent, and it's a communication tool. And especially if you're working with a whole group of people and, you don't know who's going to be there with you in labor, then if each person has an opportunity to discuss that.
Yeah, one of my favorite quotes comes out of an Australian educator, and she says, you're not allowed to not allow me.
Right.
Well, what a pleasure this has been. Thank you so much for taking time, Diane. And I want to help people find your book, Life After Birth. It's on Amazon, or where can they buy it?
Yes, it's available on Amazon, and it's available in a lot of bookstores and a lot of online bookstores. And it's called Life After Birth, the Parent's Holistic Guide, because everything about it is holistic, to thriving in the fourth trimester, not just surviving. The app is called Digital Doula 2.0, and that's available in the App Store as well as Google Play. And the online course is thrivinginthefourthtrimester.com, and it's 4th. So, and my website is dianespeier.com, DIANESPEIER.com.
Okay, we're going to link all of this in the show notes, and just thank you so much, and congratulations on your course launch tomorrow.
Thank you. I'm really excited. It's really kind of generating a lot of excitement now. Thank you.